So the thumbprint is really one of those things that guys are going to have to deal with when you're talking about dating women who have been in marriages, long-term relationships, sometimes just very tumultuous ones, and when they have, I would say, at least two children, maybe sometimes one. But what this thumbprint is the mark that has shaped who she is and will continue to be for some time unless she intervenes with serious help. But we can't erase what we've gone through, and we can't erase what effect that has had upon us. Sometimes we can manage it if it's traumatic, but we don't always have the ability just to say, I can erase that part of things. So the thumbprint is the impression that a man has put upon a woman at some point in her life. My examples, I've seen a few. I'll start with probably the darkest is a woman who I dated had dated a man who was now in prison, and he basically had beaten her almost every day. And she would tell me these horrific stories, and she was still scared and traumatized by a man who was locked into a federal penitentiary. And that is a thumbprint. And his name came up often. And while that did not bother me, that his name came up often, it just showed that she hadn't addressed these issues in a clinical and professional way. And that his influence was so great that it was probably going to affect her for the rest of her life. Now, I was in my mid-late 20s, and I want to say she was late 30s, early 40s, and it was that damning. So it doesn't always have to be at a young age that this happens to women. Marriages clearly will have that mark, and depending on how the marriage ends and how things move forward from there, as far as co-parenting, how did they go to court? Were there court proceedings? Were there things that you had to go and prove? Like when I split with my ex, we weren't even married, but I still had to show financial proofs. I had to show, all these things where the children were concerned, and I didn't have alimony and things like that to heap on top of it. So a lot of times you're fighting for things and assets that you feel are owed over some course of time. Now, when that is all said and done, I think there's a different take to it, but it also depends on what was the award. Was she awarded a certain amount that was satisfactory to her? Did she feel like she was given less? And if she was given more, how does that now have a relationship with the man who feels slighted by a system paying somebody possibly more than he should have, or maybe more than he feels that he should have? So there's a lot of areas where that thumbprint can be lasting. But the initial thumbprint is that there was a marriage, there were children, and it was a long-standing relationship up to some point. We also have the long-term relationship. And I mention mine because I was never married, but it lasted almost 20 years. And when we split, it was very much like a divorce. There was talk of what could and couldn't be taken from the home. There was basically we ended up in court over the notion of custody and things of that nature. So I understand now that the thumbprint that I put onto the mother of my children is one that will last her lifetime because of our children. And I also understand now that she's remarried why her now husband had such a hard time with my presence. Now, there were some things that I'm positive that she told him during our split that made me really look like a bad guy. But that also is part of the thumbprint, because we've talked since, and she just admitted a lot of the things that she did and said were out of hurt. So there again is the thumbprint. The thumbprint will speak to how somebody acts, perceives you to be in that moment and moving forward. Now, we have a good relationship as far as our co-parenting now and who we are towards each other. We've built back to a respectful place. But in that moment when emotions are running high, you have to really be careful, because that's when that thumbprint will really tell you how deep it is. because the more somebody has loved you possibly is the equivalent of how much they can hate you. The more that somebody wants to see you built up is as much as is the equivalent of how much they would want to see you destroyed. So you have different aspects of what that thumbprint can mean and what that can do to somebody, and how you are now as a new man coming into that relationship. A lot of people need to realize that you are getting with some people that are very unhealed, very unwilling to address their traumas, very unwilling to even admit that they have a problem, because there's a part of them that has just fought back and is now saying, well, this is how it is, this is how I'm going to be, I'm fine. And they're not fine. They're not fine. It's like a very badly sprained ankle, maybe even a fractured leg. And just because you can still walk on it doesn't mean that you are in a healthy state. Doesn't mean that that walk, limping, very much gated, means that you are able to move yourself in the same capacity that you did before that injury. Now, we have these instances of, yes, of course you went through something, but there are people that get divorced and they move on relatively unscathed. Of course, the end of any relationship that you deemed long-term that comes to an end, 99.9% of the time is going to leave a mark on one, if not both parties. What I'm speaking to now is for men. Guys, understand what you are getting into and who you are getting it into with, because you're not just dating them, you are also taking on children, you're also taking on whatever relationship they had with their former spouse or the parent of these children. And a lot of times the thumbprint will also extend to how they deal with their family as well. So you may walk into a relationship where that man was loved by that family. And it's going to take a lot for you to be accepted. And it's going to take a lot for her to accept that you need to be accepted. And there has to be a respect line drawn with that. That's another thing. The respect when it comes to dealing with these thumbprints has to be very clear and concise. Somebody I've been involved with at one point was speaking about her children wanting their father to be able to come to the house. And she said, that's fine. And then she had told me that she had also said that he could stay there and she would just go to her parents' house if, he was in town and wanted to be able to stay there. The first thing I said is, well, if that's the case, you can, I would hope you would come stay with me since we were dating, involved, things of that nature. But I sat on it for about a week. And when the conversation came back up, at least as far as he was concerned, I asked her if she understood the boundaries that I needed to see put in place where he was concerned. And we got into it. And when I say got into it, I don't mean in a combative sort of sense, but we broached the topic. And what I had spoken to was the ability to say to her, where we lie, in a sense, is almost like a marital bed. You can't invite another person into that, namely your former spouse. And she understood immediately. And I said, look, this is nothing against that man particularly. I've never met him. I don't know him. But just imagine me telling you that the mother of my children was sleeping in the bed that you and I lay in. And when I put it in that context, then she understood it more and more and more and more. And that's an important thing to do when you are having conversation as far as putting things in place where boundaries, borders, and respect are concerned. You really have to speak it logically and precisely in order for it to sometimes hit right in that bullseye, because you're dealing with sometimes a ranging bullseye of emotions. And so you have to be able to time it and hit it, which is why I didn't bring it up the moment that she spoke about it, because that bullseye would have been moving all over the place trying to find a way to deflect or defend said point. to say, yes, I wanted my children to be able to feel that their father could spend the night. That man has the ability and the resources, if he can fly in town, to certainly find a way to entertain his children outside of that home and certainly not have to sleep in his ex-wife's bed. But she was willing to do that because the thumbprint is great. My ex, mother of my children, she's willing to do certain things or allow certain things the way she and I get along. And I don't mean I get away with murder. That's not it. I don't ask for anything. But there's certain things I recognize that she does because the thumbprint is great. The thumbprint is deep. And it's one where even when you go through something with somebody over the course of a year or two, such as a split, divorce proceedings, asset splitting, child custody, any of those things, you still have to compare it to all of the years that led up to the demise. Even though it might erode for, I'm going to use mine, almost 20 years. Well, a lot of those years were good, and then there was a point where it started to erode, things like that. But even those years, you still hold on hope that there is something that's going to be good that comes from it. So with that said, you're dealing with such a small fraction, which is why a lot of people are able to get back to having at least a good relationship, if for no other reason than for the sake of their children. But the thumbprint can be very deep, as well it should be. And as men, I don't think many of us go into relationships, especially long-term ones, with the notion that at some point we're going to wreck it and end it. Most relationships aren't ended by men as far as the formal proceedings. Now, a lot of men may end their relationships through being neglectful, being lazy partners, through infidelity, through money issues, which I believe is a number one cause of divorces, things like that. So there can be various reasons. But at the same time, somebody officially saying, I'm filing for divorce generally is on women, and I believe it's a high percentage, 70-80%, something along those lines. So when those things happen, we still have to look at it versus a lot of good things. And good things generally come from children. When you've had children with somebody, chosen to have children, I don't mean like baby daddy, baby mama situation where you met at spring break or you were being very casual. When you intentionally talk about having children with somebody, you have made life-changing and legacy-building decisions. That's that thumbprint. That's the thumbprint that the next man is going to always look at in the form of these children, and that's okay. Stepfathers should be applauded when they are doing things like a father would, even if the father is in the picture or is not. You still have to be a man about your business and be able to say, yes, I accept all of this. Now, a lot of them don't, and that's okay as well. But the thumbprint is great. And a lot of guys are going to have to face the reality, especially as you date older and things like that, that a lot of times we're not the first choice. How could we be? We see it in children. We see it in failed marriages. We see it in asset splitting. We see a lot of things that they chose somebody else prior to us. Doesn't mean that we won't be able to garner their respect. It doesn't mean we won't be loved by them or anything along those lines. But what it means is we are in a very precarious position, especially when we come from someplace where we were the maker of the thumbprint. A lot of times that turns into, wow, you can really feel second class if you allow that to be part of it. So you walk into these relationships fully composed, fully built up, have your mind set, have your values in place, have a game plan for what you would want at every stage from first meeting, casually, interested, and maybe onto long-term in marriage and possibly children if that's the case. That's how you garner that respect, and that's how you will put your own thumbprint, maybe not over that the other thumbprint, but you can put your own thumbprint in as well. You can have something that will change the course of their lives as well. And it doesn't have to just be fighting or through insecurity, because that's what I saw or was led to believe was happening when it came to my ex's new husband, he had a lot of questions and insecurities about me. Though that was the thumbprint. That was him probably hearing my name through my children with their mother to some extent, which really maybe gave him pause to think, what am I doing here then? So, guys, please understand that the thumbprint is great. You can do many things to maybe not erase it, but certainly overcome it. Because you do, as a man in these relationships, deserve your respect. You should be giving your respect as well. But you should also understand that a lot of times we weren't the first choice, and that's okay too. But what we want to make sure that we are doing is really putting ourselves in the best position possible to accept everything that we're going to, immerse ourselves in, and make a decision early on. Is this something that I really want to be involved in? Children, an ex, possibly whatever small amounts of drama that they're going to have that you're going to hear from, their family. There's a lot of things that are going to be part of that thumbprint. And as a new member to it, you deserve your respect. You deserve to have your say. So make sure that you claim that, and make sure that you walk in with that knowledge that I won't just come in as a surrogate or as something less than what is worthy of who I am and what I'm coming into this relationship with. So I hope this helps, and I hope that it makes some sense on some levels. And if there's a commentary to be had, it would be great to be in the chat. It would be great to see more subscribers, more people talking about these topics in a calm and concise manner rather than having attacks on each other and this gender sort of thing. This is just my end of it as a man dating women. I'm sure there can be a lot of women that can say, well, we need this, this, and that. That's great, but I'm not a woman, so I'm not going to speak for women. Women can speak for themselves, and I'm only speaking from my anecdotal experience. So you'll speak from yours as well, but what I didn't want to do was try to make too many general sweeping statements because I don't know every woman. I've not dated every woman. So I'm going to leave it at that. But hopefully this finds everybody in your place, pursuit, or beginnings of total health, mind, body, and soul. Peace, love, unity, solidarity.